Hello and welcome. My name is Meepolis, they, she, he, and this is Literally Graphic. And today we are looking at Everything is an Emergency, an OCD story in words and pictures by Adam Katzenstein, an illustrated memoir published by Harper Perennial in 2020. This book is part of my anti-ableism TBR, link in the cards. Content notes for childhood struggle, horror images, and mention of Orson Scott Card. Katzenstein's very succinct web bio is, quote, Adam Katzenstein is a cartoonist and comedy writer whose work has appeared in The New Yorker, The New York Times, and Mad Magazine. He is the author and illustrator of the graphic memoir, Everything is an Emergency, end quote. What kinds of keywords came to mind? Nightmare, growing up, kind people, therapy, and relationships. The synopsis of the book is, quote, Adam Katzenstein is just trying to live his life, but he keeps getting sidetracked by his overactive, anxious brain. Mundane events like shaking hands or sharing a drink snowball into absolute catastrophes. Jason has Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, a mental illness that compels him to perform rituals in order to protect himself from dangers that don't really exist. He checks, washes, overthinks, rinse, repeat. He does his best to hide his embarrassing compulsions, and sometimes this even works. He grows up, worries about his first kiss, falls in love with making cartoons, moves to New York City, which is magical and gross, etc. All the while, half his energy goes into living his life, while the other half is devoted to the increasingly ridiculous rituals he's decided to maintain to keep himself from fully short-circuiting. Then he fully short-circuits. At his absolute lowest, Jason finally decides to do the things he's always been told to do to get better: exposure therapy and medication. These are the things that have always freaked him out, and they continue to freak him out. Also, they help him recover. Everything is an Emergency is a comic about all the self-destructive stories someone tells himself over and over until they start to seem true. In images, surreal, witty, and confessional, Jason shows us that OCD can be funny even when it feels like it's ruining your life. End quote. Flipping through the book, I was pleasantly surprised by the rough paper texture. The illustrations and comics portions were simple but complemented the text very well. While I certainly have not read anything by him in a long time, because he's homophobic, etc., like Katzenstein, the only OCD representation that really sticks out in my brain was in the Ender saga. Not great, so I do really appreciate the time, skill, and vulnerability that Katzenstein put into this book, especially when it came to the struggle of feeling like you need to suffer in order to be creative, and that seeking help as a creative person would actually tamp down one's creativity. This is a common obstacle that does keep a lot of people in the creative community from getting help. So it was nice to see someone speaking out from the other side and talking about how their creativity continued even after they started taking medication to help them with their mental health. Comparing it to the other graphic memoirs I've read in recent memory, I was actually impressed by how generally nice and supportive Katzenstein's family was. It was a nice change, although not knowing he had OCD or how to cope with it still puts him through hell. Obviously, graphic memoirs are generally pretty one-note when it comes to diversity of any kind. Can't really fault that. That said, for all his struggles, there does seem to be some privilege that likely contributed to Katzenstein's seeming success. It would have been nice to have been a bit clearer about class and a bit more reflective on other intersections to discourage unhelpful comparisons. This isn't to downplay what Katzenstein struggled with. I just know how hard it can be to see others who seem to have similar struggles that still manage to succeed, while downplaying their extra supports and privileges. To conclude, this book hit me somewhere between 3 or 4 stars out of 5. Probably gonna round up for now. We shall see how it goes. What makes something good or very good? Bye y'all, keep reading an organized and capitalist oppression. And as always, Literally Graphic is created on land that should be given back to the traditional landholders, which in this case is, to my knowledge, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, non-Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation.